Today on the Women Mind the Water Artivist series on womenmindthewater.com, I'm speaking with Sophie Guarasci. Sophie worked in the business world before becoming a licensed veterinary tech. Now she works at the Marine Mammal Center, the nation's foremost marine mammal hospital. Sophie says it's her dream job, even though there are times she has to make difficult decisions about the treatment of severely ill animals. The Women Mind the Water Artivist series podcast on womenmindthewater.com engages artists in conversation about their work and explores their connection with the ocean. Through their stories, Women Mind the Water hopes to inspire and encourage action to protect the ocean and her creatures. I'm speaking with Sophie Guarasci, a licensed veterinary technician dedicated to the care and conservation of marine mammals. Sophie oversees the clinical and surgical treatment and husbandry of patients at the nation's foremost marine mammal hospital. She also supervises and trains students and volunteers who are interested in both the care and conservation of marine mammals. Sophie and her colleagues look for clues to the underlying causes that led to the animal's need for care. Welcome, Sophie. We feel extremely fortunate to have you with us. Typically, I start interviews by asking guests to talk about their background. But before you do, I want to say that I have been a long-time supporter of the Marine Mammal Center. When I first learned about the center, it was a small operation located in the hills above the Golden Gate. Today, the Marine Mammal Center campus in California has grown significantly and has a smaller facility on the Big Island of Hawaii. The Marine Mammal Center has a volunteer force of about 1,300 active volunteers and estimates it has rescued more than 24,000 marine mammals since its inception. Sophie, it seems you have long been interested in the care and treatment of animals. You co-founded a dog shelter in La Paz, Mexico. How did you come to be in La Paz on the Baja California Peninsula in Mexico?
Hi, Pam. Well, that's a good question. Originally, my husband and I were drawn down there to kite surf and scuba dive. But then we were really drawn by the beauty of the Sea of Cortez, by the abundance of marine life. I'm sure you've heard the phrase that Jacques Cousteau coined, the aquarium of the world, and it really does merit that name. We were so drawn that we ended up packing up and moving down there full time.
Why did you feel there was a need for shelter and that was something you wanted to take part in?
Really, it was a question that somebody had to do it. I really couldn't ignore the many street dogs in need. And I'd done some volunteer work in England at a, dog shelter of the RSPCA, and also recently adopted a dog in San Francisco, and just really saw a need for something like that down there. And it wasn't so much a question that I wanted to do it, it's really that I just had to do it.
You and your husband share your home with 4 of them from the shelter.
Yes.
Was it about the dogs that made you want to adopt them and bring them to your home in California?
I actually found all of them on the side of the street, different places on the highway, in a garbage dump, at the gas station, and one was a little puppy, just 2 weeks old, that was thrown in the garbage on the side of the road. So I couldn't really leave them, so they all came home with us, and they were supposed to be fosters, inverted brackets. But because my husband wasn't really expecting to have so many dogs, but we just even he couldn't resist at the end, so they all stayed with us, and we brought them back to California when we moved back.
Because I know from your background that you have a degree in fashion design and you served as a vice president with a multinational financial services company. So how is it, or why would you decide to go back to school to become a veterinary technician?
Well, it was actually the Marine Mammal Center that inspired me. I started out as a volunteer at the Marine Mammal Center when we moved to San Francisco 20 years ago. I actually knew about the Marine Mammal Center when I lived in England. I'd sponsored animals on their website. So it was one of the reasons I really wanted to move to San Francisco. My husband had the opportunity to move to California, and so we settled on San Francisco. And I signed up to be a volunteer at the Marine Mammal Center pretty much on my first day of arriving here. And it really was because moving from England, I was in awe at the ability to work in such close proximity to all the amazing species that come through the center. So that was what really inspired me to have a career change from finance and fashion design to becoming a veterinary technician and getting licensed. And now I've been working at the center full time for 14 years on staff.
Well, I'm extremely jealous. I was unfortunate enough to have known about it, and then I moved away, and I always would love to, I pay attention to what's going on, which is why I'm so glad that you came on and can share your passion and my passion with our listeners. So give us some of the basic facts that people should know about marine mammals.
I mean, there are so many fascinating facts about marine mammals. So, it's hard to know where to begin from their intelligence, their physical capabilities, their resilience. But I think that probably the one thing that people need to know the most is that they really are sentinels of ocean health. They tell us so much about their home, the ocean, which, is essential to human health.
So, what aspects of working with these ocean creatures do you find most fascinating?
One that really stands out to me is their resilience. Um, I can give an example. One species that always fascinates me with just how resilient and how strong they are. Little northern fur seal pups that we often get in the fall. And these are a species that live very far offshore from people. So they're what's known as pelagic species, and they rarely come ashore onto the mainland. But when we do get these patients, they're usually young. They're 3 to 4 months old. They've just weaned from their mothers, and they're so small and so strong. They weigh between 20 to 30 pounds. And what fascinates me is that this small age and this small size, they actually, what they do is that, when they wean, they head out to sea for 2 years and they actually don't come back to land at all. They're far offshore. So it always amazes me that they have these incredible abilities and they're just so resilient, to the ocean and to their environment.
Well, skipping to something on the other side of the scale of measurement, how large is the largest marine mammal you've worked with? And can you tell us about the challenges of trying to treat an animal of that kind of size?
I mean, the largest species that we work with, and I've worked with personally, are whales. Of all, from blue whales to all kinds of whales and cetaceans and dolphins. We don't bring the whales into the center, but we do respond out to them in the ocean to disentangle them. If you're talking about animals on site that we treat, then California sea lions, big crested California male sea lions that weigh up to 800 pounds, are definitely the largest animals that we have on site and present a huge array of challenges to work with. I mean, because of their size, we really have to adapt protocols to work with them, to sedate and anesthetize them, but also just working with them day to day, trying to move them, trying to crate them, cleaning in their pens. You really have to learn to work with them because they're so large that if you want them to move somewhere, they're not going to move unless they want to move. So you really have to understand their behavior and their psychology, and you have to learn how to work with them. So I think that getting to know how to understand them is really an important part of learning how to treat them.
Being a vet, particularly of marine mammals, is a very creative. I mean, you have to, develop protocols and work with these animals, and that's an art. It's an art and a science, of course.
I'm glad you said that because it really is. It's both. It's an art and a science. Like there's obviously the science behind it, but working day to day with the animals, it is a bit of an art because you have to learn to do things around them. And as I said, with the big sea lions, moving them around, and so there is, and every animal is different. They're all individuals and individual cases, so it's definitely an art and a skill. I think a lot of people don't realize that.
I expect it to challenge trying to treat a little known marine mammal. Have you ever faced that kind of situation?
Yes, I have actually. And it would be the Guadalupe fur seal. Um, they're a species that's a threatened species that comes from Mexico, and their main breeding ground is actually Guadalupe Island, which is 100 miles offshore in northern Baja. And really, before 2015, they'd rarely been seen at the Marine Mammal Center and in California waters at all. Then 2015, when we had a large El Nino weather event, we suddenly had over 30 of these animals on site. So we really didn't have a strong baseline for caring for these animals or how they would respond in rehabilitation. So we had to use our 50 years experience with other seals and sea lions to apply to them, and really learned by just working with them and handling them and treating them, to see how that they would react and behave. And in fact, they're very different from other northern, from other fur seal species like northern fur seals. They're much more shy, much more reserved. So since then, we've seen an increasing number every year. They've been migrating further north, whether it's for warming waters or, fishing, practices and locations of fish. So now we've had to develop systems and protocols, to care for them, specifically for their care. And we've also engaged in a lot of population and behavior research with these animals to learn more. So they're definitely a good example of treating a species that was very little known before, and having to learn from them.
Well, it sounds like one of the most important things in your job is patience, patience with yourself to figure out how to deal with the animal, and patience with the animal to, have them calm down and let you work with them.
I agree. Patience is very key. Um, you certainly can't rush things or predict things when it comes to working with animals. Um, every day, every situation is very unpredictable.
That keeps it interesting. Please,
Absolutely. Every day is interesting at the Marine Mammal Center.
please tell us about one of your favorite encounters with a marine mammal.
Gosh, that's a difficult question, but there are so many encounters that are memorable. I have to say, some of my favorite moments that are most gratifying to me is when we cut fishing line or fishing nets, of patients, particularly because it's something that, we as humans have caused. And, these injuries can cause such great suffering, but we can alleviate them, right away. So that's something that's very close to my heart, is that project. And it's something actually that took me back to La Paz, because I saw a need down there with the sea lion rookeries. There were a lot of entangled animals. So it led me to start doing some disentanglement work down there, with the local authorities and the local vets. And we've, launched, 6 expeditions down there. And since then, the locals have taken up that work and doing it themselves and continue to do it. So we've actually disentangled, already counting over 60 animals down there, which is very, very gratifying to me.
It's very nice to hear that the locals have taken it up. So, what would you say to someone who thinks that saving one animal isn't very important and that your efforts and that of the Marine Mammal Center should be focused on a bigger picture?
Well, I believe that conservation is a global issue. We all eat from the same ocean, and that's particularly, and we rely on the same ocean, particularly important as our populations continue to grow. So I think everyone does need to care about it, and we can all make a difference in some way.
I expect that most people in the San Francisco area know something about marine mammals. People from landlocked states, however, may not know much about marine mammals and only what they've seen on TV, in movies, or aquaria. Why should a person, say in Iowa, care about a sea lion found in the waters off California?
These animals can tell us so much about what is going on out there in their home in the ocean, which is so tied to human health. I think there's one fascinating fact that always stands out to me, is that in the course of our work at the Marine Mammal Center, we've discovered that roughly 1 in 4 California sea lions has cancer. And we found that there are direct ties to human-caused contaminants like PCBs. And so again, our work is so closely tied to ocean life and what's going on out there, that people do need to care about that because it does impact them. They're eating the same food, and so we really need to take this issue seriously and learn from these animals.
Finally, Sophie, what do you think are the greatest threats to marine mammals?
Unfortunately, Pam, there are a lot of threats to marine mammals, from climate change to overfishing to pollution to ocean debris, just to name a few. But I think we always have to have hope, hopeful that with care and attention, we can restore a healthful balance to the oceans. And I do believe that everybody can make a difference. Every time we save an animal and we release them back to the ocean, it makes me hopeful that we can make a difference.
I am extremely grateful to you, not only for being on, but for the work that you do, both for the animals and in conserving the ocean. So thank you very much. I'd like to remind listeners that I've been speaking with Sophie Guarasci, who is concerned with the medical care and conservation of marine mammals. Sophie and her colleagues at the Marine Mammal Center also work to understand the underlying causes for their patients' illnesses. Sophie is the latest guest on the Women Mind the Water Artivist series podcast. The series can be viewed on womenmindthewater.com, Museum on Main Street, and YouTube. An audio-only version of this podcast is available on womenmindthewater.com, on iTunes, and Spotify. Women Mind the Water is grateful to Jane Rice for the use of her song, Women of Water. All rights for the Women Mind the Water name and logo belong to Pam Ferris Olson. This is Pam Ferris Olson.